abilities in so many ways. Like we have, half the guys might be breachers, so anyone can put slap an explosive on the door and use the right one, the appropriate one to get through to gain access to a building. A quarter of the guys are snipers. So we were able to fill in each other's roles. And early on, I was the assistant point man and navigator, and one of the snipers, and of course the medic. And at the time, it was Chris leading a lot of those, so I was learning from him how to, as a navigator, you're responsible for coming up with a ideal but safe route to your destination. And you don't realize it at the time because you're just E4, E5 at the time, just going through. You think it's normal, but that's so much responsibility to be able to come up with a plan on your own, to review the SIGACs. Hey, intersection, I think it was it 293, yeah. Which would have like double-digit SIGACs a day, and realizing, hey, let's probably go a different way or go through this alleyway, and reviewing the satellite imagery to see and understanding and trying to go through, do like a dirt dive, which is just basically just planning the route in your head and seeing what kind of obstacles you might see or landmarks, because GPS wasn't super reliable at the time, especially since we had jammers going on 24/7 so that people couldn't remotely detonate IEDs. We'd try and jam all frequencies. So a lot of times you didn't have GPS, so you needed to know the route cold. And then as a point man, being able to dismount safely and then guide your platoon to the target on foot. And that also takes careful route planning, careful route study, and making sure you get the right target, because you can have pretty bad consequences when you hit the wrong target. And of course, you're a shooter, just like everyone. Everyone's a shooter, from the lowest enlisted to the OIC is a shooter, is responsible for their lanes, for engaging the enemy, for returning fire, for being a shooter. And once you're on target, if this happens to be an Overwatch, we'd set up the night before and set up sniper Overwatch positions so that we had good observations of different angles, different lanes that the enemy might try and use to attack us, or worse, attack our brethren, our Army and Marine Corps brothers and sisters who might be doing a route clearance or might be doing a patrol. And that's just like one flavor of the many different types of missions that we did. We talked about DA, direct action missions. Those were a little more direct. You'd probably just drive up. It doesn't require as much, I guess, you're not trying to be as surreptitious. It's kind of going in loud. You're not fooling anyone. You go in loud, aggressive, hard. And it's just a different flavor of a mission. And those are just kind of an idea of the kinds of things that I did and a lot of our platoon mates did.
How'd you like working with Chris?
I learned a lot from Chris. It was, he was a hard teacher, but I learned a lot of important lessons from that. And I feel like I've been fortunate to have a lot of teachers and mentors, role models along the way throughout life. Leif is certainly one. High school teachers, in medical school, at NASA, my current job, and just trying to take a little bit of what they teach you, those pearls, and incorporate it into your own style, to what works for you. And certainly with Chris, I had a lot of those pearls that I learned to help me become a better operator and a better leader.
Now, as you're doing these missions, and there was a lot of violence happening. Our Army and Marine Corps brothers were getting wounded or killed almost on a daily basis. amount of enemy attacks was basically almost 24 hours a day. There were enemy attacks happening inside the city. There were massive IEDs that were just sickening. You could hear them. You'd hear them on base go off. Or if you were out in town, you could hear them go off, and you know that when they went off, there was wounded and mutilated and maimed and killed Americans. I mean, every single time you'd hear one of those, it would make me cringe. As you continued to roll out, day after day, what was your mindset? I've talked to a lot of combat vets, and right down to one of the guys that I had on named Dean Ladd, who was a Marine in World War II, who was gut shot walking to the beach in Tarawa. This is after he did EWO. I mean, or Guadalcanal. And, I was talking to him about it. He's like, I never thought it would happen to me. That was kind of what cleared his mind. But those guys, I mean, it's a different type of combat where, look, they're going to do this assault. And it's going to last 2, 3, 4 days before they get to kind of settle in. They had less time to think about it. Without a doubt, they had less time to think about it. They weren't coming back to a base like we were, where you're relatively safe, and then you got to reload and go back again. How did that play out inside 21-year-old Johnny Kim's mind?
Yeah, and I don't think I've ever been asked that. It's a pretty, I think, insightful question. And I don't think I've asked other people what mental calculus, what things they needed to go through to prepare themselves for these challenges. I know what I did and what worked for me, and I don't know if it works for other people or if that's what other people did. But I mean, I have no qualm saying, but when I showed up to Iraq, I was scared. I mean, it was my first deployment, and on your first deployment to a war zone, I don't know if other people, but I was in the frame like, as soon as I step off this bird into country, like, I'm going to get shot at, which is not at all the case, right? There's varying levels of intensity in the war, right? I mean, there were some bases where you had Taco Bell and Pizza Hut, right? And then you had like the sticks where Marines were roughing it and sleeping in holes in the ground that looked like graves. And so there were varying experiences. And, for me, I quickly learned my first big firefight was, I'm sure you remember this, but it was an unfortunate blue on green incident. And that was a big wake-up call to me. And I'm sure we could talk at length about that. A lot of lessons learned from it. But I quickly learned that the mental preparation I needed to do for myself was to assume I was going to die, that I was already dead, and I was there to fulfill my role in the platoon as a shooter. And that was liberating for me. It was hard to get in that frame of mind, but once you got in that frame of mind, for me, it was easier to stay in that frame of mind. Kind of like how when I was cold in buds, I wanted to stay cold. So there were guys who would take a warm shower if you had the opportunity to. But for me, I wanted to stay uncomfortable, because being uncomfortable is an important trait. And once I was able to reconcile that I wasn't going to come home, that I was going to die, it freed me to be able to do my job without the human emotion that can be very disabling, which is fear. And I think it made me more clear of mind and focused, and I think it made me a better operator. But I don't know if that works for everyone, and I don't think that is also a very healthy state of mind to stay in for long periods of time. I think you need to learn how to decompress and learn how to switch things on and off and have space in your brain, compartmentalized spaces where you can put very bad emotions or very disabling emotions away so that you can do your job at hand. That's what seemed to work for me.
Yeah, I think that's a common attitude. I know that as 100% what my attitude was okay, this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to keep doing it, and there's a chance I'm going to die, and that's the way it is. And if it happens, then it happens. But I think what makes it feel liberating / good is that any concern, let's face it, you can do everything right. You can plan the perfect route. You can manipulate your weapon perfectly. You can maneuver through the streets perfectly. You can still get killed. Whether you can get shot, whether you get blown up, it can happen. And if you're worried about things that you can't control, then you're wasting energy and you're not providing the correct support to the rest of your guys because you're freaked out about what's going to happen to you. And that's why I think that's pretty common, actually, is, okay, look, here's the risk, and now I'm going to put that in a box over here. I'm not going to worry about it anymore because it doesn't do me or my team any good. Now, this is where I think from a leadership perspective and then from a medic / corpsman perspective, the most absolute anxiety that I had, the sick, twisting gut that I would have, wouldn't be at all from me getting blown up or me getting shot or me getting killed or anything happened to me. It was 100% because of you guys. And it was impossible for me to not think that if you guys were rolling out an op or Delta was rolling out an op or whoever was rolling out, that there wasn't a chance. Look, if it's not happening tonight, it's going to happen tomorrow. And if it doesn't happen tomorrow night, it'll happen in 2 weeks. I know one of these nights the call's going to come on the radio, and I know what the call is going to be. And it was like, and again, I don't want to sound fatalistic about this because I didn't think about it in a way. I didn't think about it like, hey, throw caution to the wind. This is going to happen anyways. It wasn't like that at all. It was like reality. The reality was, I'm talking to the brigade commander every day. I'm talking to battalion commanders every day. I know what's going on out there. In some cases, I'm tracking it, by the hour. And so that, in my gut, was the hardest, was the hardest thing that I had to deal with, was just being worried about you guys. That was it. And I can only imagine for you as a medic, same thing. Hey, you can't trade bullets with bad guys every single day. You can't walk down these streets every single day and get away with it for the whole time. It's just not very likely.
The only thing stronger than fear for self, for us, was fear of letting your platoon mate down or fear of getting your friends killed. That, to me, is the greatest fear of all. And I agree with you if you accept that you may die, you may not come home, your friends may not come home. It's not being complacent about it. It's not being, okay, well, it's out of my hands. No, you're going to do your best. You will not get complacent. You will remain hard to kill. You will be effective in your job. But you understand the risks of the work you have ahead of you. And you accept those risks. So you are free to be effective in your job.